Everyone thinks aliens are just a movie mystery, a diversion for those afraid to look higher. But when I asked Jesus the truth, the answer wasn't about space. It was about us. And what he showed me that night changed everything I believed about life, death, and who truly inhabits the stars. My name is Michael Harris. I'm 60, and I've been living like a shadow in a house too silent for 3 years. My wife, Grace, died of cancer, and since then, time has stopped with her. Every room still holds her voice, her scent, as if a fragment of her spirit refused to leave. I haven't truly prayed since, but every night, looking up at the sky, I've kept asking, God, are you really there? Or are you all out there, beyond the stars, watching us like children playing in the mud? I was an aerospace engineer. I spent 40 years calculating trajectories, satellites, orbits. I searched for God in numbers, between matter and the void, convinced that if he truly existed, he would reveal himself in the language of the cosmos. I never imagined he would answer like this. That June evening, I was driving down the E80, heading to Reno. It was pouring rain, and the sky looked like a huge iron slab. The radio crackled an old country song, and I was thinking of Grace, of how everything had gone dark with her. Then, without warning, something shifted. The rain stopped. The engine ceased vibrating. The whole world froze in one absurd instant. In front of me, the sky split open like a wound of light. It wasn't lightning. It was something alive, conscious, watching me. An oval shape, white, pulsing like a cosmic breath. It hit my eyes, and I felt the air around the car tremble. I swerved, but it was like driving in a dream. Then came the impact, a scream of metal, exploding glass, my body wrenching forward. When I opened my eyes again, I didn't feel anything, no pain, no fear, no weight. I looked down and saw my body wedged in the wreckage. Blood ran over the dashboard, but I wasn't inside it anymore. I was floating above the car, suspended in an impossible silence. And everything around me, the rain, the lights, even the wind, was motionless, as if time had ceased to exist. Then I saw it again. The light. The same light that had blinded me a moment before. It was opening in the sky like a living door, a wound of purity that breathed. It didn't come from afar, it came from within. I don't know how, but I felt it clearly. That light knew me. And then the voice arrived. Not through my ears, but inside me. Michael. It was a tone no human could imitate. Full of love, authority, compassion. Yet there was something familiar about it. It was as if that voice had been speaking to me forever, in dreams, in tears, in moments when I thought I was praying into emptiness. Do not be afraid, it said. You have searched the stars for proof of God. Now you will see what the heavens hide from the eyes of men. My heart, or what was left of it, burst open like a collapsing dam. I felt a warmth pass through me. Then nothing weighed me down anymore. The earthly world retreated like a tide. And I, who had always been a man of logic, of science, of formulas, was crossing the border between the visible and the eternal. I wasn't dying, I was going home. And it was then, in the absolute silence, that everything began. I wouldn't know if it was death or birth, but it was the most real moment I have ever lived. I no longer felt the weight of my body, nor the beating of my heart, yet my consciousness was clear, as if my entire being had converged into a single point of perception. There was no pain, no time, only a peace so immense it seemed alive. Around me stretched a space that was not space, a white and liquid expanse, like breathing fog. Every molecule seemed to move with its own rhythm, a universal heartbeat to which, unknowingly, I was harmonizing. I remember thinking that perhaps I was dreaming, or that my brain was projecting images to soothe the fear. But I immediately understood that wasn't the case. That white was not an emptiness, it was full of presences, of silent sounds, of something that was watching me with love. The idea of me versus the rest did not exist there. Everything was part of everything, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel alone. Then something inexplicable happened. The light began to move. Not as light moves on Earth, but as if it had an intelligence, an intention. It pulsed, breathed, gently approached me, and the closer it came, the more I perceived a warmth that did not burn, but healed. I had the sensation that every atom of that light knew every wound I had ever carried, even the invisible ones. And then it happened. A voice. It did not come from outside, nor did it pass through my ears, but it was inside me, like an echo coming from the depths of my own spirit. Michael. The way it spoke my name was the most unsettling thing. It said it as if it had created me, as if every syllable had been chosen with love. I turned, but there was no face, only a luminous form that seemed to change with my perception. At times it looked like a man, at times a woman, then something that had neither gender nor age. It was like looking at consciousness made substance. "Do not be afraid," the voice said, and those words swept through my being like waves carrying away the burden of years. "Now you will see what lies beyond the veil men call the sky." I remember trembling, but not from fear. It was as if my entire being knew it was before a truth too vast to be contained. I managed to whisper, or perhaps only think, "Are you God?" The light seemed to smile, even though it had no face. "I am the one who shows you. The name you seek, you will discover by looking." Those words expanded into space, like ripples in water. Then something happened that I will never forget. The light opened as if it had flung open a passage. It was like seeing the very fabric of reality tear, but without violence. Behind that rift was not darkness, but another light, deeper, golden, alive. I felt drawn in, and in an instant I was inside. Billions of colors, of sounds that had no human equivalents, flowed through me. Every color was a voice. Every sound was an emotion. It was like walking inside a song. I realized I wasn't just seeing, but remembering. It was as if all this was familiar, as if this was my true home, and I had simply forgotten I had been there before. And as I moved forward, images began to emerge, not projected, but real, alive, three-dimensional. I could touch them, and they touched me. I saw planets, seas of light, beings moving like golden shadows. Everything was harmony. Everything was connected by an invisible but present will, like a cosmic mind orchestrating life in all its forms. I understood that I was not in a place, but in a state of being. It was as if I had crossed the threshold between the visible and the invisible, and was now about to witness the unveiling of the very blueprint of creation. The voice returned, closer, almost within my breath. "Every man walks through life like a blind person in a garden of stars. You asked to know, and I will show you what truly lies behind the sky." The light intensified, and everything around me began to rotate slowly, as if the cosmos itself were taking shape before my eyes. I felt the presence of other beings, invisible but real, moving in the light with grace, without weight, as if they had been waiting for me forever. Then, as if time had ceased to exist, everything fell silent. Only the voice remained, soft, sacred, inescapable. "Look, Michael. Remember what you have always known, but have forgotten." And in that moment, the light opened further, and I saw. When the light passed through me, there was no transition, not a step, not a movement. Simply, I was elsewhere. I floated above a blue planet, but it wasn't Earth. I knew it without needing to deduce it. It had oceans like ours, yet the water was not water. It shone like liquid glass, and its color changed to the rhythm of music that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. The air wasn't transparent, but golden, alive, as if it were a cosmic breath uniting everything. I felt no wind, yet everything moved, everything vibrated with a higher logic. Then I saw them, the cities, or rather what my mind could translate with that word. Enormous structures floated above the planet, suspended in an impossible balance, built of light, crystal, and sound. Every tower seemed made of frequencies, and the frequencies were matter. From afar, they looked like transparent cathedrals. Up close, they were living organisms, pulsating in continuous metamorphosis. The light didn't just illuminate them, it nourished them. It was as if they were made of solidified consciousness. A thought brushed my mind, and immediately I received a response. "You are not observing a city," a voice said inside me. "You are contemplating the mind of those who inhabit it." Then I understood that those structures were not constructions, but projections. What these entities thought took form. Matter was the language of thought. Every gesture created architecture. Every word generated breathing geometries. I was told, not with a voice, but with pure understanding, that this place was one of the dwellings of the Elohim, the ancient guardians of life. I was overwhelmed by the beauty. The concept of darkness did not exist. The light did not come from a sun, but from everything that existed. It was an intelligent light, modulating according to the emotional state of the beings present. I did not see bodies like ours, but luminous presences, conscious sparks moving with grace, without weight, communicating through vibrations. They enveloped me with their energy, and I felt no fear. I felt recognized, as if I had returned to a place where I had been before being born. "Welcome," said one of those presences, and in that single word was the echo of an entire universe. We are those whom men have called gods, angels, or aliens. But we are neither. We are servants of the design, gardeners of creation. The words struck me as self-evident truths. I then saw ancient scenes, sculpted in light as if in a living book. A distant time when the earth was young, and a group of these beings surrounded it, touching its oceans, sowing in its seas tiny sparks that contained the code of life. Some of those sparks became plants, others animals, and still others beings who would one day look up at the sky, wondering where they came from. It was shown to me how they had visited Earth many times, not as conquerors, but as teachers. They brought knowledge, and every civilization that saw them interpreted them according to its own language. For the Sumerians, they were Anunnaki; for the Egyptians, solar gods; for the ancient prophets, angels of the Lord. But no one truly understood who they were. "We are not the creators," the voice explained to me. "The creator is beyond even us. We guard life, but we cannot generate the soul. That comes only from the center, from the heart of the light." Those words made something tremble within me. I understood that what I was seeing was only one stage, one link in an infinite chain of consciousnesses, each one a guardian of the one below it, each one sustained by the one above. There were scales of existence, levels of reality, vibrational planes where every being learned to become light for other younger beings. And we, humans, were the smallest among them, but also the most loved, because we contained the spark of a freedom that even the Elohim did not possess. The possibility of choice. One of them came closer to me, or perhaps they all merged into one, so united were they, and showed me a sphere of light floating before my face. Inside were images of Earth, cities, wars, prayers, people who loved and hated, who were born and died without ever knowing why. "Look," it said, "this is the garden entrusted to us. And these are you, the children of the breath. We gave you the spark of the mind, but we cannot give you the heart. That belongs to the Creator." Then I saw an image that took my breath away, a column of fire descending from the sky in the middle of the desert, and a man kneeling, speaking with that light. I understood that this scene had been recounted in 1,000 ways: Moses, Elijah, Ezekiel, but the truth was always the same: a contact, a communication between worlds. Every faith, the Elohim told me, is a fragmented memory of a real encounter. But words have distorted the meaning. We are not the masters, we are the custodians, and we too answer to a higher order, which you call God. I looked at those suspended cities, and I understood that I was not just observing an extraordinary place, I was seeing the invisible hierarchy of creation. And in that instant, with a clarity I had never felt before, I knew that the universe is not an empty abyss, but a living body, populated by consciousnesses that sing the name of the One in infinite languages of light. And as this awareness flooded me, I heard the voice tell me once more, soft as a breath, "Do not forget what you have seen, Michael. Your species believes it is alone, but it never has been. Now you will know what it means to be human, and how sacred that is." I can't say if I walked or was carried, but the feeling was that of passing through a living gateway, as if I were moving inside a current of conscious energy. The walls were not walls, but streams of light that flowed like water and held within them images, sounds, memories. It was like walking in the marrow of history, in the place where time is not a line, but a river that flows in every direction. Every step revealed eras, civilizations, names I knew only from books, and others I had never heard of. A voice, the same one that had accompanied me from the beginning, whispered within me, "Look, Michael. What men call the past is not dead. It exists here, suspended as eternal breath." In front of me, the light took shape, and I saw men with clay-colored skin lift their eyes to a sky full of signs. The Sumerians. I recognized them immediately. Their stepped temples shone like antennas to the stars, and scribes carved clay tablets with symbols that seemed to vibrate, as if they were communication codes. A glow descended from the sky, not like lightning, but like a column of silent fire. The men knelt, and I understood that they were not praying to an invented god. They were responding to a real presence descended from above, which spoke with them in the language of the sky. Then the scene shifted, and I found myself in the desert. An old man, alone, gazed at the stars and listened in the silence. I recognized him without anyone telling me. It was Abraham. The stars spoke to him like living eyes, and I heard words that did not come from human lips. "Look toward heaven and number the stars, if you can. So shall your descendants be." But what I saw was not just a promise. It was an encounter. A beam of light descended upon him, a kind of subtle ray that seemed to connect his heart with the firmament. I understood that Abraham's faith was not born of nothing, but from a direct contact with what is beyond the visible world. Then I saw a simple room, a young woman kneeling, and a beam of light penetrating the window like a liquid gold thread. Her face was full of wonder and tears, and in that light I glimpsed a form, not human, yet infinitely benevolent, that bowed over her. "Mary," murmured the voice that permeated everything, "received a message of light, not a fable. But men have translated reality into symbol because they could not accept the vastness of the mystery." Each scene followed another like a heartbeat, and each beat revealed that the religions of Earth were born from a single matrix of experience, the contact between heaven and earth. The ancients had called it theophany, divine appearance, miracle. But now I understood that behind every myth, every scripture, lay a fragment of truth clothed in human language. Men remember what they do not understand, the voice explained to me, and they transform memory into worship. Words become temples, symbols become doctrines, and the light they descended to bring turns into religion. But the origin is always one, an encounter between the visible and the invisible. I paused. Everything around me pulsed, as if the corridor itself was breathing. Inside the light, ancient texts appeared, the Torah, the Gospel, the Quran, the Upanishads, but the words dissolved, and behind them emerged a single form, like a luminous heart beating inside all the books of the world. The letters merged, becoming vibrations, then sounds, then light, and the voice said, "Every sacred language is an echo of the same voice." Men have built walls where I had drawn bridges. I felt small, humble, overwhelmed. Everything I had believed I knew about faith, about religions, about the opposition between science and spirituality, was dissolving like ice in the sun. The scriptures were not fairy tales, nor inventions. They were chronicles of an ancient contact, filtered through the heart and fear of men. I understood that the prophets were not delirious visionaries, but witnesses to a language too vast to be translated. And the voice, almost like a father consoling a child, whispered again, "Man does not lie when he speaks of God. He simply mistranslates what he has seen, and he forgets that the vision was only the beginning." I stopped, looking at the infinite images flowing in the walls of light. Cultures succeeding one another, hands praying, eyes weeping, stars returning to shine over temples now in ruins. Everything was connected, and everything cried out the same truth. Heaven has never abandoned us. It has always been here, hidden behind the veil of words, waiting for someone to remember. And just then, as I thought about how fragile our understanding was, the voice returned, softer, almost human. "Michael, the veil is not in the sky. It is in the mind of men. And soon you will see what keeps it closed." I felt the light move around me, like a sacred wind preparing a new passage. The corridor of origins trembled, and a new vision opened before me. I can't say if they approached me or if I was drawn to them, like an atom to its natural center. The light around began to bend, taking on contours, vibrations, forms, and from that light, figures were born. Not men, not spirits in the sense that the human mind imagines, but beings made of living energy, a substance that seemed to breathe, think, love. They looked like humans, only because my mind needed to comprehend them in a recognizable image. But I felt that their true face was something vaster, something that escaped the categories of body and matter. They were transparent, like water crystals, yet they radiated power, a gentle, almost maternal strength. Light flowed within them, and that light contained sounds, harmonies, voices of distant worlds. I noticed that the form of each one shifted slightly according to my gaze. Some seemed like men, others women, and others still just golden glows. It was as if they responded to my heart, showing what I needed to see. "Do not try to define us," one of them said without moving lips. "Forms are bridges, not dwellings. We are frequencies, not bodies." Its voice did not come from outside, but from within me, and every word generated waves that passed through me down to the bones, down to the most intimate fibers of my consciousness. I observed them with a mixture of reverence and awe. Some seemed surrounded by a golden aura that conveyed warmth and compassion. Others had cooler, almost silvery tones, as if they contained a more rational, detached power. There was no conflict, but a delicate balance, like two polarities of the same current. "They call us angels or aliens," said another, whose face changed with every beat of my heart. But we are messengers, guardians of passages, witnesses to cycles. We appear where the veil between worlds thins, where someone calls us with sincerity. I asked him, or perhaps only thought, if they still visited Earth. And immediately I saw. Images surrounded me like living projections, men and women throughout the centuries, in different places and cultures, looking up at the sky or closing their eyes in prayer. I saw them dreaming of faces of light, sensing presences during the night, receiving messages they would later call visions, apparitions, divine inspirations. "We continue to visit you," they said, "but not in the way you imagine. We do not descend with ships or fire, but with vibrations. We enter dreams, thoughts, in moments when the mind is silent and the soul listens. Not everyone perceives us, only those who have kept their hearts pure or who suffer enough not to resist the truth anymore." These words pierced me. I remembered my wife, her last days, her silent way of praying when the pain was too great to be expressed. I wondered if she had seen them, if she had felt that presence that now surrounded me. One of them came closer to me, or perhaps enveloped me, and I perceived in him a compassion so profound it made me tremble. "Many of our brothers chose another path," he told me. "When they were given the power to shape matter, they were dazzled by it. They believed they could create instead of serve, and so the division between light and shadow was born." The scene changed, and before me appeared an immense space, like a liquid sky traversed by waves of energy. On one side, a vortex of the purest light, radiating calm, order, love. On the other, a denser, almost red glow, emanating desire and domination. They did not fight with weapons, but with vibrations. The light elevated, the shadow attracted, and in the middle there was a neutral field where the two forces intertwined, generating reality. "The war is not as you imagine it," the voice said. "It is a dance of polarities. Light does not destroy shadow, it transforms it. But shadow always tries to make itself the center, to hold back what must flow. Thus the cosmos lives in the breath between giving and possessing." I understood. All of human history, its thirst for power, its wars, its divided religions, were nothing but reflections of that eternal vibration. The same battle that took place in them took place in us. I looked again at those beings of the sky, and for an instant I had the sensation that they were crying. Not with tears, but with light. "Every time you choose love instead of domination," they told me, "a part of us is reconciled. You are the key. Humanity is the field where division can become harmony. That is why we watch over you and continue to speak in dreams, in silences, in the signs you refuse to see." In that instant, I understood that the angels were not only messengers, but witnesses to an invisible war that also runs through our hearts, and that the choice between light and shadow is not fought in the heavens, but within us, every day, in every thought, in every act of love or selfishness. And as this awareness enveloped me, one of them leaned toward me, and his voice became like a breath. "Michael, what you will see now will show you how deep the wound of man can be when he forgets his origin." Then the light around me bent again, and the world changed. I don't know how it happened, but the air, if one could still speak of air, changed substance. Everything around me began to vibrate with an unprecedented sweetness, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The beings of light that had surrounded me stopped, and a living silence, full of anticipation, filled every space. It was not emptiness, it was presence, a tension of love so intense that my soul perceived it as a song without sound. Then, from the center of that suspended world, the light opened like a heart unfolding. From that rift did not emerge a body, but an essence that progressively took shape. It was light, yet not just light. It was fire, but it did not burn. It had a face, but every face I had ever loved seemed contained within it. When I finally saw him, I understood that I could never forget him. It was Jesus, but not the Jesus of the paintings, not the pale man nailed to the wood, not the symbol of a religion. It was the living one, the Son of Light. Love made consciousness. The other beings bowed in a single movement, like a wave of light prostrating itself to the sea from which it came. I remained still, unable to speak. Inside me, a silent weeping dissolved into gratitude and awe. He looked at me, and his gaze was like a ray that pierced my soul. There was no judgment, no distance. In those eyes, I saw the sum of all compassions, the root of all forgiveness. It was as if all of time, with my errors, my sorrows, my small victories and my cowardice, was contained in his gaze and thereby transfigured into love. His face had no defined features, yet it had them all. At times he seemed Middle Eastern, at others African. Then he changed into something purely luminous, as if all the races of the world lived within him. His hands had no visible wounds, but they carried the memory of them like light blossoming from overcome pain. When he spoke, his voice did not pass through the air. It entered me, as if the words were my own thoughts, known forever and only now remembered. "Men seek me on the cross," he said with a tone that was both power and tenderness, "but I am no longer there. I am the life among the stars. I am the vibration of love that holds creation together. I descend into every world where consciousness forgets its origin, to remind it of who its author is." Those words were like a storm of light. I then saw that the universe was full of inhabited worlds, of consciousnesses that each prayed in its own language, and that in each of them the light had taken form, different yet the same, to reveal the same message. Love is the essence of everything. It was not only earth that had received the Christ. The Christ was the very soul of creation, the spark that manifests wherever matter becomes conscious of itself. Jesus raised a hand, and the sky above us, if it could still be called sky, opened like an infinite canvas. Inside, I saw galaxies, constellations, solar systems rotating with perfect order, and in each one a central light, a spiritual sun that emanated the same vibration I felt coming from him. Every star, he told me, is a word spoken by the Father. Every world is a syllable of his love. I am the word that gives sound to that silence. I could no longer distinguish whether I was seeing or understanding, whether my heart was listening or simply dissolving into the truth. I felt my fears melt away one by one. Death, guilt, loneliness, even the grief for grace. Everything found meaning in that moment. She was not lost. I was not a castaway. Life was not an experiment. It was part of a design that breathed through him. Then Jesus approached, and the light around intensified to the point of becoming almost palpable. My hands, if I still had them, filled with warmth, as if they were clasping the heart of God himself. He placed his hand on my shoulder, and the whole world stopped. There were no more planes, no more dimensions, only his voice. "Michael, every being, human or celestial, seeks to return to what it has forgotten. The path is not from bottom to top, but from darkness toward memory. I am the door between the worlds, but also the key that everyone carries within himself. When you love, you open me. When you forgive, you invoke me. When you believe, you make me visible." The tears that flowed from me were not made of water, but of light. I felt myself dissolving in his presence, like snow returning to vapor. He smiled, and in that smile I saw grace. I saw my parents. I saw every face I had loved and lost. All were contained in him, and I understood. Jesus did not belong to one people, nor to one planet. He was the living manifestation of the love that binds all worlds, the link between the finite and the infinite, between the creature and its author. Then, with a softer voice, he told me again, "Do not forget what you are seeing. When you return, tell men that they are not alone in the universe, but neither are they separate. I live in all that loves. The cross is the shape of matter that opens to let the light pass through. Do not deny it, but look at it as a door, not as a prison." And as his words continued to vibrate within me, the light around became so intense that my consciousness began to lose form, as if I were about to be absorbed into his heart. But instead of fear, I felt an infinite peace, the very breath of God enveloping me, reminding me that everything, every star, every tear, every life, exists only to tell the same truth. Love is real, and it has no boundaries. When Jesus moved his hand, the reality around me opened like a curtain of light. There was neither transition nor displacement, yet everything changed. I found myself in a place that no human language could fully describe. It was not heaven nor earth, but a dimension suspended between both, a garden floating in space like a living island, immersed in a symphony of colors and sounds that do not exist in our world. Every flower emitted a note, every tree breathed, every stone contained light. It was like being in the thought of God before matter took shape. Jesus walked before me, and his presence made everything around him vibrate. Wherever he passed, the light became more intense, and the petals opened as if they recognized their creator. I followed him, still astonished, feeling that in that place time had no dominion. The air was alive, saturated with intelligence and sweetness. There was no shadow, yet everything had depth. "This is the beginning," he said, turning toward me. His voice was calm, but within it, vibrations from other worlds passed through me like waves. Here, the beings of the sky planted the seed of man. Here began the great adventure of consciousness, the thirst for knowledge that would bring sorrow, but also freedom. Before us stretched an immense tree, whose roots did not sink into the earth, but into the light itself. I saw them penetrate the fabric of the universe, absorbing glows that rose like divine sap. Its branches extended to touch distant stars, and among the leaves shone fruits that were not matter, but spirits, conscious sparks, souls awaiting birth. Jesus approached the tree and touched one of those fruits with his fingers. It lit up like a miniature sun, and I saw inside it human forms, faces, entire lives preparing to descend into the flow of time. Every soul, he explained to me, is a seed of light. Some fall downward, attracted by desire, by power, by matter. They descend into the dense worlds to learn to remember where they come from. Others ascend, driven by love, and return to the source. None is lost. Everything returns. Everything learns. I looked more closely and saw that not all the fruits followed the same path. Some fell downward, and their splendor dimmed, becoming a veiled, almost grey glow. I saw them incarnate in worlds of stone, water, fire, and pain. I saw them forget their origin, fight, love, and die. Others, however, ascended like light flames, passing through dimensions, transforming into sounds, colors, and vibrations that rose until they dissolved into the very heart of the light. This, Jesus said, is the Garden of Beginnings. Here everything originated, and here everything returns. The story of man is the journey of these sparks that get lost and find themselves again. Every time you choose to love, one of these sparks ascends. Every time you choose to possess, it falls again. And so the tree grows, breathes, evolves with you. I turned to look at him. There was an infinite melancholy in his eyes, as if he carried the memory of every soul that had gone astray. "But then," I asked with a broken voice, "why does knowledge bring pain? Why must those who seek the truth suffer?" Jesus smiled, and his smile was like a dawn dissolving doubt. "Because freedom is born only where there is choice," he replied, "and choice cannot exist without the risk of error. Light is understood only after having known the shadow. One does not grow by avoiding the fall, but by learning to rise again." Then he looked up at the sky of the garden, which was neither blue nor black, but a fabric of living stars. "Now the time has become short," he said with a solemn voice, "and the garden is preparing to bloom again. Heaven will once again touch the earth, and many will see what the ancients called the children of the stars." I then saw, above the tree, immense luminous spheres moving in the firmament. They were like conscious stars, not cold like our planets, but alive, pulsing with intelligence. From them descended threads of light that touched the distant earth, like roots seeking contact with lost seeds. Jesus gestured for me to look. "What your eyes call sky is not an empty space, but a network of life." The children of the stars will return not to conquer, but to awaken. They will come not as gods, but as brothers. His words echoed within me as both a promise and a warning. I felt my heart expand almost to the point of breaking. The tree, the garden, the luminous spheres, everything began to dissolve, as if the vision was closing. Jesus turned to me one last time. "Remember, Michael," he said, "no one is born by chance. Your life is a seed from the garden, and your return is not the end, but the beginning of a memory the world has forgotten. When you speak, do not tell men that I visited the heavens. Tell them that the heavens never left." Then the light became wind, the garden vanished, and I felt something calling me back elsewhere, a distant sound, a heartbeat, like the heart of the earth reclaiming me. It didn't happen like in the movies, with dizzying zooms and flashing graphics. It was more like a caress, pulling back a curtain. The light around me became transparent, and, as if looking through clear water, I saw it. The earth, suspended in the living darkness of the cosmos, beautiful and vulnerable. A blue iris, surrounded by veins of clouds, and green glows, breathing like moss under the dew. It always surprises me how small it appears when viewed from the outside, yet in that smallness lay a density of stories that no mind could contain. I looked at it for a long time, with the same nostalgia one looks at a yellowed family photo, and I felt a sudden desire to embrace it, as one does with a child who has understood nothing yet feels forgiven. Currents moved around the planet, not of air or water, but of light and shadow. They were not still. They brought to mind tides, invisible rivers moving in waves, crossing continents and oceans, enveloping cities, penetrating houses and thoughts. Some currents were shining, almost golden filaments, slipping gently like blessing hands. Others had the density of a dark, glistening smoke, a substance that was not evil in a cinematic sense, but a desire to hold back, to possess, to bend the world to one's will. I understood without words that those currents were not external forces in the way we perceive them. They were the magnified reflection of the inner choices of billions of hearts, and at the same time the echo of ancient spiritual families who have always watched over or interfered, like loving relatives, or like relatives who have never stopped demanding payment. Jesus remained beside me, and when he spoke, he did so with a simplicity that dissolves the edges of the mystery. "Heaven is closer than you think," he said, and it was not a reproach, but an invitation to breathe deeper. The forces you have called extraterrestrial are ancient spiritual families, some serving the light, others rebellious to love. They do not live in a separate elsewhere. They are interwoven with your history like roots beneath the floor of the house. Sometimes they have taught you to build and sing. Sometimes they have stifled your song out of a hunger for domination. But the true judgment will not come from above, but from the awakening of consciences. When the sum of your choices lights the scales, you will see what already is, with no more veils. As he spoke, the earth was changing. I saw entire regions tremble, not from earthquakes, but from sudden jolts of the collective soul. People stopped in the streets, looked up, sensing that something was about to break or be born. I saw cities suddenly illuminated by appearances in the sky, not metallic discs as on pulp covers, but geometries of light that composed and decomposed like visual hymns. Architectures that seemed like cathedrals made of frequencies, and in the midst of those forms, the presence of messengers who did not descend to stun, but to tune the instrument as one does with a piano before a concert. Some fell to their knees, others screamed, others laughed and cried at the same instant, because when the truth touches you, one single emotion is not enough. I saw nations retracting like hedgehogs, tightening the borders of fear, and others opening like hands, offering bread and listening to anyone knocking with uncertain steps. I saw men arguing on channels, on pulpits, on stages, trying to squeeze the infinite into words too tight, like trying to pass the sea into a bottle. And I saw others, silent, placing a chair outside the door and staying to look at the sky until the evening air became a prayer. I saw scientists change vocabulary and believers change posture, and in both there was the same shyness of children realizing they are entering a room where the game is no longer played as before. The final contact will not be technological, Jesus said, and in that denial there was no contempt for technology, but the gentle correction reserved for a friend who has misunderstood the essential. It will be spiritual, the day men recognize the same spirit that dwells in them, in the messengers of the sky. Then you will no longer ask where they come from, but from whom they come, and you will realize that the answer is the same one you carry in the bottom of your chest when you love without reason. The currents around the earth became faster, and I saw things that I could not order chronologically, as if the future were a mosaic that someone was showing me all at once. Crowded squares singing a melody in many languages that they didn't know until the day before. Hospitals where invisible hands, or perhaps hands made invisible by discretion, guided the doctor's gestures with new precision. Deserts where communities began to bloom like oases, not by meteorological miracle, but because people had decided to stay and cultivate instead of extracting and fleeing. I saw, among the houses, lights entering like swallows and touching the foreheads of children, leaving a trace that parents mistook for fever, but instead was a thirst for meaning. At the same time, the shadow did not stand by. It thickened in places where fear was administered like an anesthetic, in the rhetoric of simple solutions, in markets where everything is sold and nothing is given, in glances that weigh the other as a threat or a commodity. It was not spectacular, it was efficient. It crept into small daily gestures, small compromises, until the chain became heavy and someone said, "It's too late." Yet, every time that phrase was formed, I saw an old man stand up with the slowness of the righteous and say, "It's not late as long as I breathe," and his breath moved a current of shadow as big as a neighborhood. In the midst of that seeing, I felt my wife's presence, not as an apparition, but as a perfume returning to a closed room. Her patience, her way of holding my hand when the doctor spoke and I no longer listened, became a private icon that explained the universe to me better than any theology. Love is the method by which heaven becomes operational on earth. Remember it. Jesus said without looking at me, as if he had read the thought and made a seed of it. You will not win by arguing, but by loving in a way that is unbearable for the shadow. I then saw the so-called signs in the sky multiply. Not courtroom evidence, but invitations, like notes left under the door. On certain nights, the clouds opened in symmetries that did not belong to meteorology. On others, thin lines traced alphabets on the firmament that no telescope could capture, because they were not made for sensors, but for consciousness. The messengers passed over the cities not to be photographed, but to tune the spirits, and those who had sharpened fear felt an annoying hum, while those who had sharpened hope felt a song that made them cry alone in the kitchen without knowing why. Many will ask for conquests, landings, protocols, Jesus said, and his voice contained the smile of one who understands the eagerness of adolescence. Others will ask for catastrophes, so they can say, I knew it. But the threshold is not crossed with curiosity or terror. It is crossed with resemblance. When humanity recognizes the same law that vibrates in its center, the gift, in the guests of the sky, then the door will already be open, and you will realize that there was no lock, only the habit of keeping it closed. I cannot say how long that vision lasted, because time, there, is a habit that one gladly forgets. I know, however, that in the end I was shown something very concrete. Warm kitchens and set tables, neighbors who hadn't spoken for years and were now breaking bread, laughing at their own stubbornness. Schools where children, instead of memorizing answers, learned to cherish questions. Churches and laboratories with wide-open doors, as if research had finally understood that truth is not a monopoly, but a round table. I saw hands getting dirty with earth and hands gripping delicate instruments, and in both the same dignity, because the only hierarchy remaining was that of service. This, said Jesus, is the awakening. Not a procession of wonders, but the conversion of normalcy. When normalcy begins to resemble the kingdom, the signs will no longer be needed. The messengers will be able to walk among you as brothers, and you will recognize them not by their splendor, but by their gentleness. I remained silent, watching our small earth breathe between currents of light and shadow. I understood, for the first time without defenses, that nothing is foreign to us if we choose not to be, and that judgment is not a sentence falling from above, but a transparency rising from below when we stop lying to ourselves. Then the vision trembled slightly, like a tuning fork that has finished vibrating. The light changed tone, and I understood that what I had seen was not a prophecy meant as a threat, but a reminder. Heaven doesn't arrive, it is let in. Jesus placed his hand on my shoulder, and everything I wanted to ask was summarized in a single desire, to be worthy of that letting in. Soon, he said, and it was not a chronicle, but a promise. And remember, when you know how to recognize me in someone you dislike, heaven will have already touched the earth to the extent entrusted to you. The earth, down there, continued to turn, unaware and wise, like a heart that doesn't stop beating, even when man sleeps. And I knew the vigil had begun. I cannot say when it began to change. The light surrounding me, which had been as welcoming as a womb until that moment, began to vibrate more intensely, as if a cosmic breath were inhaling me. I felt a call, distant but unmistakable, like my name whispered in the wind of all ages. Michael. A single word, but it contained the sweetness of my wife, the strength of my father, the voice of childhood, and the warmth of God. Every time the light pronounced my name, it was as if the entire universe loved me simultaneously. Michael, remember, heaven is not above you, but within you. Those words were like a seal, a command that came not from on high, but from the intimate core. I felt that something was about to end, and a part of me rebelled. I didn't want to leave there. I didn't want to leave that peace that had no boundaries, that certainty of being home, not in a place but in a state of being. But the light was alive, and like a gentle sea, it began to withdraw, taking me with it. It felt like falling, but not downward. I was falling through billions of stars, vortices of colors opening and closing like portals. Each one showed me a life, a face, a possibility. I felt the heartbeat of the universe becoming slower, more physical, until it merged with another beat, mine. Then a dull sound, like thunder coming from underground. Pain. A red flash. The metallic taste of blood. The visions dissolved like smoke, and in their place came the weight. The body. Cold, dense, imperfect. I felt something pressing my chest, hands pushing, agitated voices. "He has a pulse! Keep going!" An artificial light struck my eyes, too harsh after that divine brightness. I tried to speak, but my throat did not respond. There was a mask over my face, and behind the glass I saw the face of a doctor and a tear running down his cheek. Someone shouted that I had been dead for 12 minutes. 12 minutes. I smiled inside because I knew I hadn't been dead. I had been home. Death is not absence, it is return. It is the moment the body stops and the soul remembers who it is. Everything I had seen, the garden, the beings of the sky, the face of Jesus, the revelation of the earth, was not a dream. It was more real than anything I had ever touched with my hands. I tried to move, but my body was heavy, like a temporary tomb. Tears welled up in my eyes. They were not tears of fear, but of nostalgia. I missed the light, the sound, that perfect communion that has no words. Yet deep down I felt that a part of that light had remained in me, lodged between my ribs, like a small secret sun that would never go out. As they revived me, the last words of the voice returned with absolute clarity. "When the earth looks at the sky with eyes of love again, the children of the stars will return, and you will call them angels." Those words pierced my heart more than the physical pain. I understood that my return was not a punishment, but a mission. I had to tell, not convince. I had to live so that people could see, in my eyes, a reflection of what I had encountered. Heaven should no longer be preached as a destination, but rediscovered as a presence. A hand touched my forehead, and for a moment I saw Grace. Not as a ghost or a vision, but as a luminous echo just behind my eyelids. She was smiling at me. There were no words between us, only a deep knowing. She was still there, beyond the thin veil we call the end. Then she disappeared, leaving me with a sweet, fragile peace I had never known before. I breathed. The first breath after death is different. It is an act of obedience and gratitude together. Every molecule of air entered my lungs as an ancient gift, as if the earth itself were welcoming me back into its arms. I heard my pulse quicken, the sound of the monitors, the rapid footsteps around me, and in the midst of all that chaos, a perfect calm, the awareness that nothing, from that moment on, would be random. I opened my eyes. The light in the room was cold, but inside me a warmer one burned, the light of the garden, the light of Christ's face. I understood that every human gesture, every look, every forgiveness is a fragment of heaven attempting to re-emerge. We do not have to climb to paradise, we only have to stop burying it. And as the doctor pronounced my name to ensure I was conscious, I felt it vibrate once more with that same sweetness I had heard beyond the veil. It was no longer a summons, but a reminder. "Michael," I seemed to hear in my consciousness, "now live as if heaven were not distant, but in the breath of everything." And in that instant, I returned to my body, but I was no longer the same. I had brought a piece of eternity with me. Thank you, truly, for staying with us until the final moment of this story. If you're still here, It means something within these words has stirred your soul. Now, we'd like to ask you to take one small action that could ripple across eternity. Write a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. We want to lift your nation up in prayer. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next message that might speak directly to your heart. And above all, share this video with at least 3 people you care about. A friend, a family member, someone who needs light right now. One simple share could awaken faith, rekindle love, and bring someone closer to the embrace of God. May the peace of Christ fill your home and guide your steps today and always.